Hi everyone, my name is Horan. I'm here in the United States in the San Francisco area, and what I'd like to talk to you about today is a concern that many Americans have, and that is the division between people. Whether those divisions are political divisions or whether they're economic divisions. People talk about the 1% having money and the rest not having quite so much. And also social divisions, prejudice, various forms of racism here in the United States. So the question is, where does this really come from? So we all know that politics to some degree have a play in this, but at the same time we also know that media is a very important source of generating fear, fear being a reaction to people or situations that we're not familiar with. But what I'd like to talk to you today is about attention, something that's much more subtle. And so two aspects of attention. One aspect of attention is short attention span, and the other is selective attention. So Microsoft in the year 2000 did a study of people's online attention capabilities, and they found out that the average attention span was 12 seconds, but in 2012 that had reduced to 8.5 seconds, and I'm sure many of you have heard that a goldfish's average attention span is 9 seconds, so that means we have on an average less attention span than a goldfish. I don't know. That's kind of unusual to say the least. There was a survey done in the UK in 2012 where 410 teachers and 2,000 adults were responding to a survey about the attention span of children from 2 to 11 years old, and 91% of the adults felt that attention had dropped over the years due to on-screen activity. That means smartphones, video games, and so forth. So why is this? Why does attention span seem to be reducing over time? Well, one reason is television and the media. Concision is something that's very important in the media. So concision means basically if you have a message, get it across as quickly as possible. And the reason for this is basically time, and time is money. Because the media are actually corporations and they're profit driven. So the media has had an impact on our ability to pay attention because things are delivered to us very, very quickly and hopefully potently. The other thing is in advertising, the use, even on television, the use of sound bites. So basically a sound bite is a short, memorable phrase that has meaning, and sound bites on the average nowadays are about 9 seconds long, so more or less within our attention span. And examples of sound bites would be Nike's ad, or tagline, "Just do it." And politicians talk about surgical bombing. Years ago, John F. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." So these are sound bites, and the more we become influenced by sound bites, because they do have meaning and they're memorable, the more we gravitate towards information that comes in that sort of form. The other thing is social media. Social media, if you're on WhatsApp and various forms of Facebook and so forth, you'll notice that a lot of the messages, text messages, are very, very short. Twitter is a good example. Twitter allows you, I believe, 140 characters. So we're forced in a way to, or entreated in a way, to deliver messages as briefly as possible. The other thing is video games. The use of video games. So video games involve two things. One is immersion, and the other is agency. Agency is they're empowering. They give you a sense of personal power. Immersion means in terms of the graphics and the gameplay, that it keeps you engaged. And usually if you look at video games, most of them are pretty high speed. In other words, there's constant change happening in video games. If a video game was very, imagine a first-person shooter where everything was happening in slow motion, in a very, very short period of time, most people would become very, very bored with that and move on to something else. So video games have had also an impact. And basically what's happening is that we have a tendency to prefer simplicity over complexity. In other words, whether it's in business or so forth, give it to me short, give it to me straight, give it to me simple. Don't ask me to think about it too much, or to tell me that, X is related to Y, is related to Z, is related to B, and so forth, where I have to kind of pull the puzzle apart. So we don't really have the attention span for this. The second part of attention span is an excess of information. Simon Herbert, famous economist, said that a wealth of information creates poverty of attention. So the more information we have, the less attention we have. So how do we handle that? How do we handle this excess of information? So now we get to selective attention. So selective attention is we focus on things that are important. Anything that's a distraction or seems to be less important or less urgent, we don't pay attention to it. Now this would seem to be something very, very beneficial. Although the human beings, most of us, are driven by our reward system. In other words, we look for benefits and we try to avoid things that are not so beneficial to us. So what happens over a period of time is selective attention is dedicated to me, myself, and I. In other words, what in the world or what information in the world benefits me. So that actually causes us to think in a bubble. In other words, for instance, I like to go to action films. I like to watch action films. So on Netflix, if I go on to Netflix, then what will come up are other action films that Netflix has selected for me and giving me a percentage of whether a higher or lower percentage of whether I would like that film or not. So there's no way on Netflix, unless I put in some effort, that I'm going to go watch an art film or something that's much more slow moving. So the same thing with Amazon. You buy books on Amazon, and then the next thing you know, Amazon is telling you what books you should read based on your profile. So we're constantly being profiled. And consumerism is actually selecting for us, helping us select things that benefit us or that we might be interested, because obviously they want to make money. But after a while, if everything is catered to what we want, then we don't really care what other people want or what other people's needs are. We're less attuned to that. So consumerism is a very important part of putting us into this me bubble. So the me bubble taken to the extreme creates something called narcissism. I'm sure you've heard this word particularly in the United States. So it's a form of selfishness and kind of grandiose feelings about our own capabilities. But at the same time, it causes us to crave admiration. So as an individual, you might not think you crave admiration, but if you're on Facebook and somebody connects with you, or you hear this ping, on your smartphone that somebody's trying to connect with you, we immediately pay attention to it. The reason being is because somebody has taken the time to connect with us. So that's a form of appreciation. And after a while we begin to crave that. So I don't know whether you have friends or whether you like this. Every time your phone goes bing or whatever it is, and immediately you pick it up and start looking at it. even if you're in a conversation with someone else. It becomes a habit after a while. So this kind of self-centeredness after a while can become an addiction. So attention, the selective attention, becomes an addiction. And we look at it as beneficial to us, but we don't realize that what it's doing is it's creating a bubble around us. Some people say, well, you know, a short attention span is really good because it helps me to multitask. Well, there have been a number of studies that show that people that can multitask actually perform more poorly in comparison to people who are not multitaskers on attention and memory. So multitasking is not quite what we think it is. So as the mind becomes more self-absorbed and distracted, then one thing happens that is not so beneficial, and that is our capacity for empathy is reduced. Empathy is our ability to stand in someone else's shoes, to feel what they feel, to see the world the way they see the world. So people that are narcissistic and people that have attention deficit problems are known to struggle with empathy. Now, in 2010, there was a study of, it was 14,000 college students. And this study had happened over a period of 30 years. And then they found out that basically empathy levels in college students had reduced by 40% over the last 20 or 30 years. That's pretty frightening. That empathy, our capacity to feel for others, had reduced that much. So when we have poor empathy, along with poor empathy comes difficulties in communication. So communication is important because communication, real communication, involves the capacity to listen to other people. Now, when people talk, they don't talk in sound bites. I don't know, maybe you talk in sound bites. Maybe I'm talking in sound bites, I don't know. But they don't talk in sound bites. So because they don't talk in sound bites, after a while your attention can drift. You're not really listening to them. So when you're actually in a conversation with someone else, just monitor your mind and see what's happening. You know, are you not listening at all? Are you listening to little bits and pieces that may be of interest to you and forgetting the rest or ignoring the rest? Are you thinking about how you want to respond to someone else, whatever they're saying, that you've got something you want to say back? Or are you truly listening to them? You know, people who truly listen have the capacity to communicate. And that type of listening is a form of empathy. So when you're not able to communicate properly with other people, you start to get a feeling of isolation. You feel alone in the world. And this deep feeling of aloneness or isolation, of course, is alleviated to some small degree by the pings on your phone. Somebody's trying to connect with you. You feel, oh, I'm not alone in the world. I have, 1,000 friends or something like that, or 1,000 different colleagues. But is that real communication with those people, these short texts? I mean, you can't see their body language, you can't hear their tone of voice, and so forth, unless they're doing short videos. So after a period of time, this kind of isolation creates fear. Creates a fear of others. Creates a fear of anything that's different, outside of our bubble. And relationships can suffer from this. So how many people today, if you go into a restaurant or see people, young people walking on the street, actually hold hands when they're walking on the street? Most of the time, if you see them doing something, you see them holding their smartphones. If you go to dinner, with younger people, even, executives and professionals today, they go to dinner, the smartphone rings or bings or whatever it is, they pick it up. And right in the middle of dinner, it's like it can't wait, to find out who's trying to connect with me for whatever reason. completely ignoring the fact that there are other people sitting in front of you. Because the thought in your mind perhaps is, well, these people that I'm sitting with are here, they can wait, and I can find out more about them at my own leisure, but whatever's coming on the phone is more important, could be more important. So relationships suffer. And if we look at relationships at a deeper level, it's about love. So love is about a deep connection with others. And as I said, short text without body language and a sort of empathetic feeling with other people does not really promote love. So what happens is the connections that we have in life that we may think is love are actually more superficial connections. And so if you look at people's conversations, they may be talking about various things, and at the end they say, "I love you." In other words, "Oh, by the way, I love you," as though that's really going to demonstrate love to someone else. Love, you have to support other people. You have to maybe do things, put in some effort, send them gifts, speak empathetically, kindly with them, many different, spend time with them, and so forth. And so if you have selective attention and short attention span, that doesn't always work. So how do we handle this? What are the remedies? Well, one is to become more aware of your phone addictions, become aware of your video addictions, become aware of addictions that you have to television, watching television, and so forth. There's nothing wrong with any of these things, but it's how much time do you spend with it? In other words, is it overwhelming you? Learn to listen empathetically. Take the time, with people, and try to find out, really what their feelings are and what their needs are. And practice mindfulness. Mindfulness, there's mindfulness meditation. It's a way to non-judgmentally accept and let go of the thoughts, emotions, and sensations in your mind. So after a while you can become a little bit more or less caught up in the things that are very transient. And then you can, importantly, you can set the connection, set the intention to connect with others. So as you go through the day, as you get up in the day, today I'm going to connect with everyone that I meet. I'm going to find a way to lovingly and heartfully connect with other people I meet, even if I'm in a rush and even if my phone is blinging and ringing away, that I'm actually going to take the time to do that. And remember that every single person that you meet, regardless of what you may think of them, their deepest need, their deepest desire is to be loved and respected. And that is something that you could probably keep in mind when you're actually texting and interconnecting with other people. And if you understand that other people require love and respect, then also you must understand that you too very deeply need love and respect. And the way to do that is to love and respect yourself, to realize what's happening in your heart and in your mind at a deeper level, and don't look at yourself superficially, and realize that you're not alone, that we all are connected. And so anyway, if we do these various things, these different types of practices, I believe that the differences that we experience with other people, with strangers, and whether they're political differences and so forth, that we'll actually be able to really communicate and bridge the gap that we're presently experiencing today. So thank you very much.